The room went quiet the moment she said it. Not the polite kind of quiet. The kind that happens when someone says the thing everyone else has been too careful to say out loud. The kind of quiet that precedes consequences. You falsified the patient outcome reports, Mr. Whitaker. 3 quarters in a row. And every quarter, the funding that was supposed to reach the trauma wing ended up somewhere else. Grayson Whitaker didn't flinch. He was 62 years old and had been in rooms like this one his entire adult life. He sat at the head of the Atlanta General board table like it had been built around him. Custom, permanent, his. His suit was worth more than Ayanna Brooks made in a month. He knew she knew that. He was counting on it matching. Dr. Brooks. He said her name slowly, the way people say a word they find mildly amusing. You are overstepping. I'm presenting documented evidence, she said. You are a trauma surgeon. He leaned forward, just slightly. You cut people open and sew them back together. That is what we pay you for. This, he gestured at the files in her hands, this is not your lane. Ayanna didn't move. She was 38 years old, and she had been in rooms that tried to shrink her since she was 17. She had learned, slowly and at great cost, that the shrinking only happened if she allowed it. 3 patients died in the trauma wing last year from equipment failures, she said. Equipment that should have been replaced 18 months ago. The funding to replace it was approved by this board and then redirected. I want to know where it went. The board members looked at their folders, their phones, the wall. Anywhere but at her or at Whitaker. Whitaker sat back. Something moved behind his eyes. Not fear exactly. Calculation. This hospital exists because of my family's investment, he said. 4 generations. 2 research facilities. A pediatric wing that carries my mother's name. You want to stand here and question my commitment to these patients. And there it was. The argument she had been waiting for. The one that was partially, infuriatingly true. Whitaker's money had kept Atlanta General alive through 2 recessions. Without his foundation's annual contribution, at least 1 floor would have closed. He wasn't entirely wrong, and he knew she knew it. That was the trap, that the man doing harm was also the man keeping the lights on, and calling him out meant accepting consequences she hadn't fully calculated. She had calculated them anyway. Your commitment to this hospital is not what I'm questioning, she said. Your stewardship of its funds is. The door opened. She didn't turn around immediately. She heard the shift in the room first, the way 3 board members straightened in their chairs, the way Whitaker's assistant made a small, involuntary sound near the window. Then she turned. Welcome to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. The home of Afro Korean love stories where passion crosses cultures and hearts learn new languages. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to powerful, emotional stories between Black women and Korean men. Filled with romance, tension, longing, and moments that stay with you long after the story ends. And to our returning family, welcome back. Your love, comments, and support keep these stories alive. Before the story continues, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Now tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And what part of this story is already pulling at your heart? Let's connect. Let's feel the story together. Kang Hyun-soo walked into the boardroom the way water fills a space. Quietly, completely, without announcing itself. He was tall for a Korean man, or maybe he just carried himself that way. Dark suit, no tie. He looked at no one in particular and somehow made everyone feel observed. Nobody in that room could have told you exactly what he did. They only knew that when Hyun-soo's foundation had made its first inquiry about Atlanta General 6 weeks ago, the hospital's chief legal officer had called Whitaker personally. At 11 at night. On a Sunday. I apologize for the interruption, Hyun-soo said. He didn't sound apologetic. I was told this meeting concerned the allocation of donor funds. He looked at Whitaker. I have some interest in that topic. Whitaker's jaw tightened. This is a closed board session. Yes. Hyun-soo pulled out a chair and sat down. I'm aware. 2 hours earlier, Ayana had been standing in the hallway outside this room with her printed files and her heart hammering against her sternum. She had spent 6 weeks pulling these records. Nights in the hospital's archive database, mornings cross-referencing quarterly reports, one very tense conversation with a billing analyst who had asked her twice if she was sure she wanted to do this. She was sure. She had grown up in a house 4 blocks from a hospital that had let her uncle wait 6 hours in the emergency room before someone took his chest pain seriously. She had decided at 15 that she would become the kind of doctor who made that impossible. She had worked every job available to a teenager in Southwest Atlanta to pay for the MCAT prep course her mother couldn't afford. She had finished her residency ranked 2nd in her class and taken a position at Atlanta General specifically because of its trauma program and its stated commitment to underserved communities. She believed in this hospital. That was why what Whitaker was doing made her physically sick. Now, sitting across the board table from Hyun-soo, she watched him open a leather folder and slide a single page toward the center of the table. My organization has completed an independent financial audit of Atlanta General's donor fund distribution over the past 3 fiscal years, he said. I had planned to present this to the board privately. Given what I'm hearing in this room, I think now is the appropriate moment. Whitaker stood up. You have no authority. I have a signed agreement with 3 members of this board authorizing an independent review. Hyun-soo looked at him without blinking. Signed 8 days ago. Would you like to see it? Silence. Ayana looked at the page Hyun-soo had placed on the table. She couldn't read the full contents from where she sat, but she caught enough. Numbers. Dates. A column of figures that matched almost exactly the discrepancies she had found on her own. He had been building this case before she had walked into this room. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or unsettled. She felt both. Whitaker looked at her then, really looked at her, and what she saw in his face was not embarrassment. It was the particular expression of a man who had just decided that she was now a problem requiring a specific kind of solution. This meeting is adjourned, he said. He left. 3 board members followed without looking at her. Ayana stood still as the room emptied around her. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Then again. Then 4 times in rapid succession. She pulled it out. The notification was from a local news alert. Someone had been live-streaming the meeting. The clip already had 11,000 views. The headline read, Atlanta surgeon confronts hospital donor over missing patient funds. Her face. Her name. Her voice saying the things she could not unsay. Hyun-soo was still seated. He was watching her read her phone with an expression she couldn't classify. Not quite concern, not quite interest. Something quieter than both. They'll move fast, he said. I know, she said. Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? She looked up at him. A stranger who had just handed her the evidence she needed and was now asking about her safety with the same tone people used to ask about parking validation. Why are you involved in this? She asked. He closed his folder. That's a longer conversation. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her department chief. She stared at his name on the screen and understood, with a clarity that settled into her chest like cold water, that her career at Atlanta General had just changed shape permanently. She didn't know yet if it had ended. But nothing about tonight would be reversible. She answered the call. If this story has got you already, you're not alone. Subscribe to Afro Korean Tales and Stories, and tell me in the comments. Would you have walked into that room knowing what she knew? They suspended her badge at 9:47 p.m. Not fired. Suspended pending review, the institutional version of a held breath. Human Resources emailed the letter while she was still in the hospital building, which told her the decision had been made before the meeting even ended. Someone had written that letter in advance. Someone had been certain enough of the outcome to prepare for it. She was walking toward the elevator when security found her. 2 men she recognized from the lobby desk. They had the particular discomfort of people asked to do something they found distasteful but would do anyway because it was their job and their job paid their mortgage. Dr. Brooks, the taller one said. We've been asked to escort you out. She handed him her badge without argument. Not because she was defeated. Because arguing with him would have been the wrong fight, and she had learned to choose carefully. The walk to the main exit took 4 minutes. She counted. The hallways were quieter at this hour, but not empty. Night shift nurses, a custodial worker, two residents who looked at her and then quickly looked away. The clip was already circulating. She could tell by the quality of the avoidance. Some people look away because they don't know you. Others look away because they do. She was 20 feet from the exit when she heard the alarm. Not the fire alarm, a smaller, sharper sound. A ventilator alert from room 114, which she knew because she had admitted that patient herself 3 days ago. 7 years old. Post-surgical. The kind of case where the equipment either worked or it didn't, and if it didn't, the window was short. She turned around before she finished the thought. Dr. Brooks, the security guard, started. She was already moving. Room 114 was a 30-second walk. The night nurse was at the station, already on her feet, but Ayanna got there first. The child's oxygen line had disconnected at the valve. Not a mechanical failure, a physical disconnection, the kind that happened when someone bumped the equipment or, and this thought came to her later, when someone who knew exactly what they were doing wanted it to look like an accident. She reconnected the line. Checked the seal. Checked it again. Watched the monitor until the numbers steadied. Pulled the call button and waited for the nurse to arrive before she stepped back. The child didn't wake up. Small blessing. Ayanna stood in the hallway outside room 114 and pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Her hands were steady. They were always steady when it mattered. It was the aftermath that undid her, the moment after the crisis when her body finally registered what had almost happened. You came back. She turned. Hyun-soo was standing 10 feet away. He had followed the commotion, or he had followed her. She wasn't sure which, and both possibilities required examination. Yes, she said. You didn't have to. I know. He looked at her with something she couldn't name. Not admiration, that would have been too simple. More like the expression of someone who had just witnessed something they hadn't expected and were in the process of recalibrating. Nobody ever came back for me, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out because she was tired and her badge was in someone else's hands and a 7-year-old had almost stopped breathing. And some things get said in moments like that whether you intend them or not. Hyun-soo was quiet for a long time. The escort is still waiting, he said finally. I know. She pushed off the wall and walked back toward the exit. This time she didn't count the seconds. Outside, the Atlanta night was warm and thick with the particular smell of a city that doesn't fully cool down even in October. A black SUV sat at the curb, engine running, that Hyun-soo's driver had positioned without being asked. Efficient. Practiced. She stopped walking. I don't know you, she said. No, he agreed. I'm not getting into a car with someone I don't know. That's reasonable. He didn't move toward the car. He stood on the sidewalk with his hands at his sides, which she noticed because most men in his position, whatever his position was, would have gestured, pointed, pressed. He was simply still. What would make it reasonable? An explanation of who you are and why you've been conducting a financial audit of this hospital for 6 weeks. That's fair. He looked at her steadily. I own a private investment group with holdings across healthcare infrastructure in 3 countries. Atlanta General came to my attention through an acquisition review 14 months ago. What I found in the preliminary financials raised concerns significant enough to warrant the audit. A pause. That's the professional answer. Is there a different one? Something moved across his face. Brief. Controlled back quickly. My son was a patient here, he said. 8 months ago. Routine procedure. It was not handled routinely. He said this without effect, which somehow made it worse. I became interested in understanding why. Ayanna looked at him. Really looked, not at his suit or his composure or the car behind him, but at the specific quality of stillness that surrounded him. There was grief in it. Old grief, the kind that had been managed into something functional but was still there underneath, pressing. She got in the car. She told herself it was the most logical choice available. She was being escorted off hospital property, her face was on local news, and the most powerful donor in the building had just looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. Logical. She didn't entirely believe her own reasoning, but she filed that away for later. Hyun-soo's driver pulled into traffic. She sat on her side of the back seat, he on his, 12 inches of space between them that felt deliberate on both sides. Her phone lit up. Not a call, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "We know what you took from that meeting. Give it back or we go after your license." She stared at the screen. She hadn't taken anything. She had presented her own compiled research. But that distinction would not matter to the people who had just texted her, because the goal wasn't accuracy. The goal was fear. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. The headline had been updated. Atlanta surgeon at center of hospital funding scandal. Sources question doctor's motives. Her photo. Her name. But this version of the story wasn't about Whitaker. It was about her. They hadn't just moved fast. They had been ready. She looked out the window at the passing city and understood that tonight had not been the beginning of something. Tonight had been the moment she became visible to people who preferred their operations conducted in the dark. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they won't look tonight," Hyun-soo said. "And tomorrow?" He didn't answer immediately, which told her he either didn't know or didn't want to say. Neither option was comforting. The safe house didn't look like anything from the outside. That was the point, she understood. A mid-rise in Buckhead that probably had a different name in someone's LLC filing, the kind of building designed to be overlooked. The lobby had 2 cameras she counted, and at least one she suspected but couldn't confirm. The elevator required a key card. The man at the front desk nodded at Hyun-soo the way people nod at someone they know not to ask questions about. The apartment on the 14th floor was large, cold, and aggressively tasteful. The kind of space that communicated wealth without trying to, which meant someone had tried very hard. A doctor arrived 12 minutes after they did. Korean man, mid-50s, bag already open. He checked the bruise on her forearm from where she'd caught a door edge during the chaos at the hospital exit, asked 2 clinical questions, pronounced her uninjured in the meaningful sense, and left without small talk. 2 men stood near the door the entire time. Not blocking it, just near it. Ayana sat on the edge of the white couch and looked at them. Then she looked at Hyun-soo, who had poured himself a glass of water and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window with the city below him. "Those men," she said. "The ones at the door." "Security," he said. "The one on the left has a specific way of standing." She kept her voice even. Weight on the outside of both feet, hands loose. That's not a bodyguard posture. That's training for something more offensive than defensive. Hyun-soo looked at her over his water glass for a moment. "You're observant," he said. "I'm a trauma surgeon. I read rooms and bodies for a living." She didn't look away. "I walked into a car with you because I made a judgment call. I'd like to know if the judgment was sound." He set his glass down. He pulled a chair from the dining table and sat across from her. Not close, but not performing distance either. Level. Direct. "My organization operates in spaces that require protection," he said carefully. "Some of those spaces are not conventional." "That's a very clean sentence," she said. "What does it mean?" Silence stretched between them. The 2 men at the door remained motionless. "It means I have made arrangements in my life that require a particular kind of infrastructure," he said. "And that infrastructure has standards for how it treats the people inside it." He looked at her steadily. "You are inside it tonight. You will not be harmed." She absorbed that. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "The audit. Tonight. Any of it." "I told you." "You told me the professional answer." She folded her hands in her lap. "And you mentioned your son. But neither of those fully explains why you walked into that boardroom tonight specifically, with that document, at that moment." He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. 8 months ago," he said finally, "my son was here in Atlanta finishing his junior year. He had an emergency appendectomy at Atlanta General. The surgery was successful." He paused. "The post-surgical monitoring was not. He developed a secondary infection that should have been caught in the first 24 hours. It wasn't caught for 72. Another pause. Longer. He recovered. But the 72 hours cost him something." He lost partial hearing in his left ear from the fever. His voice remained flat. The infection was traceable to understaffed night monitoring, understaffing that was documented in internal complaints that were never acted on because the funding for additional night staff had been redirected. She understood then, not just why he was here, why the audit had the particular quality of anger held at a controlled temperature. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not professionally. Actually." He nodded once. Said nothing. She pushed gently. "And you? What did your family raise you to do in a situation like that?" "Handle it," he said. The two words sat very still in the air. She wanted to ask what that meant. She also understood that asking would open a door she wasn't ready to walk through tonight. "I'm not going to Seoul," she said instead. "Or wherever the next suggestion is." He almost smiled. "Not quite. I haven't suggested Seoul. You're about to." His phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression shifted, just slightly, but she caught it. She was very good at catching the things people tried not to show. He answered in Korean. Brief, clipped. He listened more than he spoke. When he hung up, he looked at her with the particular stillness of someone restructuring their next several decisions in real time. "Someone placed your location at the hospital exit," he said. "They have a vehicle registration from the parking garage. They know you left with me." "Who is they?" "That's what I'm working to confirm." She looked at him. "You don't know yet." "Not with certainty." "No." And that was the thing about him that she was still calibrating. He didn't pretend to certainty he didn't have. Most powerful men she had encountered inflated their knowledge to fill the room. He only said what he knew, which meant when he was uncertain, he said so, and when he was certain, she would need to pay close attention. "What are my options?" she asked. "Stay here tonight. In the morning, we reassess. And if I'd rather go home?" "Your home address is public record," he said. "Your car is still in the hospital garage. Your neighbor across the hall is a blogger with 40,000 followers who photographed you leaving for work this morning." He said this without judgment. "Going home tonight is possible. It is not advisable." She sat with that. Her phone had been buzzing in her pocket for the last 20 minutes. She hadn't looked at it. She looked now. 47 notifications. 12 missed calls. 3 from colleagues. 1 from her mother, which meant someone had called her mother, which meant this had already moved beyond professional consequence into the kind of exposure that touched the people she loved. And 1 text from an unknown number. No words. Just a screenshot. Of her building's front door. Taken tonight. Timestamped 40 minutes ago. While she had still been at the hospital. They hadn't been watching her since the meeting. They had been watching her before it. She set the phone face down on the cushion beside her. Her hands were steady. She was distantly aware that they should not have been. "Seoul," she said. He looked at her. "You were about to suggest Seoul," she said. "Say it." "Seoul," he said. "For now. Until I understand the full shape of what we're dealing with. I don't have my passport. I can have it retrieved." She looked at the window. Atlanta glowed below, indifferent and vast, full of people who were sleeping soundly through a night that had just reorganized itself around her. "I don't trust you," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to." "What are you asking?" "For tonight," he said. "Just don't leave." She didn't answer him. But she didn't reach for her keys either. Her phone lit up one more time. The notification banner read, "Breaking. Identity of doctor behind hospital scandal confirmed. Full profile." They weren't just responding to her anymore. They were constructing a version of her. She understood then that the question was no longer whether to fight. The question was whether she could choose her ground. The gunfire started at 2:14 a.m. She knew the time because she had not slept. She was sitting on the bed in the guest room with her back against the headboard and her shoes still on, reading the articles being written about her on her phone, when the first shot sounded from somewhere below the building and the lights went out a half-second later. Not a power outage. Targeted. The difference was in the quality of the dark. Total, immediate, deliberate. She was on her feet before she finished processing it. The door to the guest room opened. One of the men from the front room, a flashlight already in his hand, spoke in rapid Korean toward the hallway. She caught none of the words but read the posture. Controlled urgency, not panic. These were people who had rehearsed for this. That told her something important about the man she had gotten into a car with. Hyun-soo appeared in the doorway. His jacket was on. He had been awake. "We're moving," he said. "Stay close to me. Don't stop walking for any reason." "What's happening?" The building's perimeter was breached. He was already moving into the hallway. "We have a window of approximately 4 minutes." She followed. Not because she had decided to trust him, because 4 minutes was 4 minutes and she was a person who made decisions based on available information, and the available information said move. The hallway was dark except for the flashlights. They went left, away from the elevator, to a door she hadn't noticed earlier that opened into a stairwell that didn't connect to the main lobby. A secondary system. Planned. They went down. Quickly. 6 flights. Another door at the bottom. Another man waiting on the other side. An underground garage that smelled like concrete and motor oil. 2 vehicles running. Headlights off. She got into the back of the first one. Hyun-soo got in beside her. The car moved before the door fully closed. In the silence of the garage exit, she looked at him. "The men upstairs," she said. "They'll follow separately," he said. "They know what to do." She watched the city slide past the tinted windows. Her heart rate was elevated. She acknowledged it, noted it, set it aside. Panic was a luxury she had trained herself out of in her first year of residency. She looked at Hyun-soo's hands, resting on his knees. His left hand trembled. Once. Then he pressed it flat against his thigh and it stopped. She looked away before he could catch her looking. He had been scared. He was the kind of man who had protocols and vehicles and prepared exits and men who knew what to do, and he had still been scared. That information settled into her understanding of him with quiet weight. Whatever certainty he projected, it was not the absence of fear. It was the management of it. She filed that away too. "That wasn't random," she said. "No. Someone knew the building." "Yes. Someone who knew where you would take me." He turned to look at her. "You're working through it." "I think better when I talk," she said. "Was it Whitaker?" "Whitaker doesn't have this kind of operational capability," he said. "He has money and attorneys and media contacts. This is something else." "Director Park," she said. The name from the board meeting, Hyun-soo's aide, the one who had been in the lobby. His expression didn't change, which was itself a change. "That's not confirmed," he said. "But it's possible. Many things are possible tonight." He looked forward. "I need to verify before I act." She studied the side of his face. The angle of his jaw. The way he held himself in a moving vehicle like it was a board chair. Composed, upright, deliberate even now. "You were going to tell me something earlier," she said. "In the apartment. About your son. You stopped yourself. This isn't the moment for." "We're in a car going somewhere I don't know yet," she said. "We have time." A long pause. The city moved past them. "Minho asked me 3 weeks ago whether I was a good man," Hyun-soo said. "He is 16. He was not asking rhetorically." She waited. "I told him I was a careful man. That I tried to cause less harm than I was capable of causing." He was quiet for a moment. He said that didn't answer the question. "Does it?" she asked. He looked at her then. And for a moment, just a moment, the composure thinned enough to show what was underneath. Not weakness. Something more complicated than that. A man who had been asking himself the same question for a long time. "No," he said. "It doesn't." The car slowed. A private airstrip. Small. The kind that didn't appear in commercial directories. A jet sat on the tarmac with its cabin lights on. "Ready." She looked at it for a long moment. "You don't get to decide my future," she said. "No." He looked at her with complete steadiness. "But the people in that building tonight do. Unless you change the terms." She sat with that. She thought about the child in room 114, about the oxygen line, about the fact that the disconnection had happened on the same night she publicly challenged the man who controlled this hospital's money. She thought about the screenshot of her front door. She thought about her mother, who had gotten a phone call tonight from someone, and who was probably sitting in her kitchen in southwest Atlanta right now, lights on, unable to sleep. She thought about what it would mean to get on that plane. And then she thought about what it would mean not to. She opened the car door. She walked across the tarmac with her shoes clicking against the asphalt and her coat pulled against the October wind, and she did not look back at him, and she did not slow down, because if she slowed down she might stop. She stepped onto the jet. Behind her, she heard his footsteps. "Atlanta is behind you," he said quietly, climbing the steps. "No," she said. "Atlanta is the reason I'm going to come back." The door sealed behind them. The engines began their climb to a sound that swallowed everything else. Her phone showed 1 bar, then none. In her last signal moment, one final text arrived from the unknown number. It was a photograph, not of her building, not of her car, of Minho, taken today, in Atlanta. A boy who was supposedly already in Seoul, photographed outside a coffee shop 3 miles from the hospital, 6 hours before the shooting started. They had not been watching her since the meeting. They had been watching all of them. Seoul arrived like a verdict. She had slept maybe 90 minutes on the jet, upright, shoes still on, arms folded across her chest in the way she slept in on-call rooms. Present even in unconsciousness, one ear always open. When she woke up, Hyun-soo was across the aisle reviewing documents in silence, a cup of green tea on the table beside him, steam long gone. He had been awake the entire flight. She didn't ask if he'd slept. She could see that he hadn't. The city outside the car window was overwhelming in the way that cities you've only seen in photographs always are, larger, louder, more particular than the idea of them. Seoul moved like it had something to prove. The Han River in the early morning light. The way the traditional rooflines of older neighborhoods persisted between glass buildings like bones showing through skin. She pressed nothing against the window. She sat straight and watched and calculated. The estate was in the northern hills. The car turned off a main road onto a private drive lined with trees that had been shaped over decades, possibly longer. The gate was iron and tall and opened before the driver touched anything. Sensors, she noted, high-end, newer than the gate itself. Someone had updated the security infrastructure recently. The main house was a combination of traditional Korean architecture and something more severe. Not modern exactly, but stripped down, like someone had taken the warmth out deliberately. High slate roofline, dark wood columns, courtyard she could see through lattice screens. It was a fortress made to look like a home. The housekeeper who met them at the entrance bowed to Hyun-soo and looked at Ayana with careful, professional neutrality that was itself a kind of assessment. Ayana smiled. The woman looked briefly surprised and then returned the smile with something more genuine before composing herself again. Elder Kong was waiting in the main hall. She was smaller than Ayana had imagined, not physically diminished but economically sized, as though everything unnecessary had been removed over 80-something years until only the essential remained. She wore a silk hanbok in dark blue, which Ayana recognized meant this had not been an informal morning. She had dressed for this arrival. That meant she had been informed. That meant she had prepared. Ayana straightened. Unconsciously. The posture of one person who understood formal weight meeting another. "You disrupted my son's life," Elder Kong said. Her English was precise and accented and carried the tone of someone who did not consider the language a concession. "I protected patients," Ayana said. "It's what I was trained to do." Elder Kong looked at her without expression. The looking went on long enough to be intentional. "My son has managed his complications quietly for many years," she said. "You made his complications loud." "His complications were already loud," Ayana said. "I just said it in public." Something shifted in the old woman's eyes. It was not approval, but it was something adjacent to recognition. She turned and walked away without another word. Ayana exhaled slowly. Hyun-soo appeared beside her. "That went better than I expected," he said quietly. "That was better? She didn't ask you to leave. They were shown to separate guest rooms on opposite wings of the estate. Ayana's room had a view of a courtyard garden, immaculately maintained, a plum tree in one corner not yet fully in bloom, stone paths that bent at deliberate angles. Korean garden design, she remembered from somewhere, was about the view from inside looking out. The garden existed for the people within the walls. She had never felt more outside of something in her life. She showered, changed into clothes that someone had placed in the room. She didn't ask whose or how. They fit. That was also a message of some kind. She found Min-ho in the garden at dusk, sitting on a stone bench with a sketchbook open on his knees, drawing something with the focused inattention of a person who goes somewhere else when they work. He looked up when he heard her footsteps on the path. He was younger than she'd expected from the photograph. 16, but carrying something older in his posture, the particular heaviness of a child who has spent significant time in adult rooms. "Dr. Brooks," he said. He started to stand. "Don't," she said. "Please." He settled back. She sat on the other end of the bench. "Not too close." "My father told me about you," he said. "What did he say?" "That you went back." Min-ho looked at his sketchbook. "For the patient. When you didn't have to." He turned the page. "He said it like it was unusual." "Isn't it?" she said. He considered that seriously, the way teenagers do when they've learned that adults who treat their questions as real deserve real consideration in return. "I think," he said, "that people do what they believe they'll have to live with." She looked at him. "That's a very precise thing to say," she said. "I've had time to think about it." He paused. "I almost didn't make it back to Korea. After the infection." He said it without drama, which was how she knew it had been processed many times before now, turned over until the sharp edges were worn down enough to hold. "My father sat with me the whole time. 3 days. He didn't leave the room." She was quiet. "He doesn't talk about it," Min-ho said. "He doesn't talk about most things." He glanced at her sideways. "Did he talk to you? On the flight?" "Some," she said carefully. Min-ho nodded, like this confirmed something he had theorized. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it out of habit. It had reconnected to an international signal somewhere over the Pacific. She had missed calls from her department chief, from 2 journalists, from a number in the Atlanta area code she didn't recognize. And one notification. A news alert. She opened it. Read the first paragraph. Then the second. Then she stopped. The story had a photograph embedded at the top. It was surveillance footage, time-stamped from a parking garage camera. Her and Hyun-soo, walking to his car together, taken the night of the board meeting. The angle was specific. Intimate-looking in the way surveillance footage never actually is, but which context can weaponize entirely. The headline read, "Atlanta Doctor's Mystery Companion Identified. Inside the Secret Alliance That Rocked Atlanta General." They had Hyun-soo's name. His face. A paragraph describing his overseas financial network, in language carefully chosen to suggest without stating. And then, at the bottom of the article, a quote from an anonymous hospital board member. "We have serious questions about the nature of Dr. Brooks' relationship with this individual and whether patient advocacy was ever really the motive here." They weren't attacking her findings anymore. They were attacking her character, her credibility, her motives. And they had done it using Hyun-soo, using the fact of him, using his presence, using the opacity of who he was, as the weapon. She set the phone down on her knee. Min-ho was looking at her. She turned to look back at the main house. Through one of the upper windows, she could see a silhouette, Elder Kong, standing very still, looking down at the garden. Watching her. She had been watched from the moment she walked into that boardroom. She had been photographed, surveilled, repositioned in every public narrative until the doctor who had found evidence of harm to patients had become the story itself, the scandal, the question mark. And now they had brought Hyun-soo's name into it, which meant they were willing to escalate to wherever that name led. She thought about the photograph on her phone. Min-ho, outside a coffee shop in Atlanta. Taken when he was supposedly already here. Someone had used this boy to send a message. Someone had stood close enough to him to take that photograph and had not touched him, which meant the threat was not immediate. It was a demonstration of reach. They wanted her to understand the shape of what they could do. She understood. She looked back at Min-ho, who was watching her with his father's specific quality of stillness. "How long have you been home?" she asked carefully. 3 weeks, he said. "I came back early. My father asked me to." 3 weeks. Before the board meeting. Before any of this had gone public. Hyun-soo had known something was coming before she had walked into that room. He had moved his son before the pressure started. That photograph in Atlanta had been taken 3 weeks ago, before Min-ho left. Someone had been compiling it all along, storing it, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. She looked up at the window where Elder Kong stood. The old woman had not moved. She was not watching the garden. She was watching Ayana. And her expression, visible even at this distance, had shifted into something that was neither cold nor warm. Something that looked, in the failing Korean light, almost like a warning. Subscribe to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. Because what Elder Kong knows, and hasn't said yet, might be the most dangerous secret in this entire story. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Ayana can trust anyone in that house? She found out about Director Park at breakfast. Not from Hyun-soo. From the housekeeper. The woman had set a tray of food in front of Ayana without comment. Rice porridge, small dishes of pickled vegetables, a soft-boiled egg, and then paused at the door and said, in careful English, "The director left last night." Quickly. She looked at Ayana with the expression of someone who had decided to cross a small line for reasons she considered sufficient. He made a phone call before he left. From the study. Long call. Then she was gone. Ayana sat with the porridge cooling in front of her and thought about what it meant that a housekeeper had told her something Hyun-soo had not. She found him in the study 40 minutes later. He was standing at the window with his back to the door, phone at his side, already done with whatever call he'd just finished. The room smelled like paper and something faintly cedar. One wall was entirely bookshelves. The desk held nothing unnecessary. "Director Park left last night," she said. He turned. "Yes. Your housekeeper told me." Something moved across his face, not quite embarrassment, more like the recalibration of a man who had underestimated a variable. "I was going to tell you this morning," he said. "Were you?" "Yes." He said it simply, without defensiveness. "I wanted to confirm his destination first." "Did you?" "Tokyo. As of 2 hours ago." He sat down at the desk. He was feeding information to a third party. Not Whitaker directly. Someone who was feeding Whitaker. "There's an additional layer I'm still mapping." She sat across from him. "How long have you suspected him?" 3 weeks. She let that land. "You brought him here. To your home. While suspecting him." "I needed to know what he knew," he said. The most efficient way to learn what a person is sharing is to control what they have access to. She stared at him. "You used him as a sieve." "Yes. And he used me as leverage without knowing you already knew he was compromised." "Essentially." She looked at the bookshelves. She needed a moment to feel what she felt about this without letting it show entirely, because what she felt was complicated. On one side, the cold competence of it, the intelligence, the three-dimensional thinking. On the other side, the fact that she had been inside this operation without knowing the full shape of it. "Was I a sieve too?" she asked. The question sat between them like something fragile. "No," he said. He held her gaze. "What you were doing at that hospital, I learned about independently. You were not a piece I moved. You were a person I chose to help." "Chose," she repeated. "Yes. Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because you went back for that child," he said. "When every rational calculation said leave. You went back." He paused. "I have been surrounded by rational calculators my entire life. They are useful. They are also very tired company." She almost laughed. She didn't. "I need to know the full picture," she said. "Not the managed version. Everything." He was quiet. "If I'm going to be useful to you, or to myself, in whatever this is," she continued, "I need to understand what I'm inside of." He looked at the desk. Then at her. Then he opened the top drawer and placed a folder on the surface between them. "This is what we have so far," he said. "It is not complete." She opened it. The top page was a financial diagram. Names, amounts, arrows. Whitaker's Foundation at the center. But the arrows didn't stop at Atlanta General. They moved outward, to 2 other hospital systems in Georgia, to a real estate holding company, to a series of shell entities incorporated in Delaware. This wasn't one man skimming funds from one hospital. This was infrastructure. She turned the page. Then the next. Her breathing stayed even. Her mind did not. "How many hospitals?" she asked. "We've confirmed 4, he said. "We believe there are more." "And Park was feeding them information about your investigation." "Yes. Which means they know how much we know." He paused. "Which means the attack on the safe house was not about stopping you. It was about stopping the investigation." She set the folder down. Outside, through the study window, she could see the garden. Min-ho was there again with his sketchbook, sitting in the early light, drawing something she couldn't see from this angle. "Your son," she said. "His infection. Was that?" "I don't know," Hyun-soo said. The words came out with a weight that told her he had been sitting with that question for 8 months. "It may have been negligence. It may have been something more deliberate." He looked at the folder. "That is part of what I need to find out." The door to the study opened without a knock. Elder Kong entered. She looked at the folder on the desk, at Ayana, at her son. Her expression was unreadable in the way of someone who has had decades to perfect its management. "The call you've been waiting for," she said to Hyun-soo in English. Deliberately in English, Ayana noted. "It came." He stood. "Who?" he asked. Elder Kong looked at Ayana for one measured moment before answering. "The board member who signed your authorization agreement," she said. "He is withdrawing his signature. He says he was pressured." She paused. "He also says Dr. Brooks' medical license review has been escalated. They are moving for permanent revocation." The room went very still. Ayana's license. The thing she had spent 20 years building. The thing that was not just a career but a covenant she had made with herself at 15 years old in Southwest Atlanta. They weren't just fighting her. They were trying to erase her. Elder Kong looked at her then with that expression Ayana still couldn't fully classify. Not sympathy. Not coldness. Something more ancient than either. "They are afraid of you," the old woman said quietly. "Afraid people only destroy things they cannot control." Then she left. Ayana sat with that in the cedar-smelling silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mentor, Dr. Elaine Voss, the woman who had written her residency recommendation and then gone quiet when the pressure came. It read, "Ayana, I made a mistake. Call me when you can. I have something you need to see." The voicemail from Dr. Voss lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Ayana listened to it once, standing in the garden because she needed open space around her, the morning cold against her face, Min-ho gone inside already. Then she listened again. Then she sat down on the stone bench and held the phone against her knee and looked at nothing. Elaine Voss had been her attending in the 2nd year of residency. She was the kind of doctor Ayana had wanted to become, technically precise, ethically stubborn, not interested in the politics of medicine except when the politics tried to harm patients, at which point she became something surgical in her own right. She had written Ayana a recommendation letter described by the department chief as the most direct endorsement he had ever read. And 3 weeks ago, she had gone quiet. The voicemail explained why. They had called her. Not Whitaker personally. Someone below him, someone tasked with managing the professional perimeter. They had told her that a formal complaint was being filed against her regarding a patient outcome from 4 years ago, a case that had been reviewed and closed, a case where Elaine had been entirely cleared. They told her the complaint would be reopened if she said anything publicly in support of Ayana. They had used a ghost case to silence a witness. And then they had gone further. The last 90 seconds of the voicemail were the part Ayana listened to 3 times. Elaine had been contacted, 2 days ago, by a former Atlanta general billing analyst. The same analyst Ayana had spoken with during her 6 weeks of research. The woman who had asked twice if Ayana was sure she wanted to do this. She had gone to Elaine because she was frightened and didn't know who else to trust. She had kept copies of documents. Not the ones Ayana had compiled. Different ones. Older ones. Going back further than the 3 fiscal years Ayana had examined. 11 years of redirected funding. At Atlanta General and 3 other systems. The analyst had the original wire transfer authorizations. Signed. Not just by Whitaker. By a second name. A name Ayana recognized because she had seen it on a plaque in the hospital lobby since her first day of residency, beneath a photograph of a man who had been described to her as one of Atlanta General's founding benefactors. She called Elaine back immediately. 2 rings. Then, Ayana. Tell me the second name, Ayana said. A pause. Not on the phone. Elaine. Not on the phone, she said again, with a quietness that was itself a kind of answer. I need you to come back. I can't come back yet. It's not safe. I know. But the analyst, she's scared, Ayana. She's been staying at her sister's house for 3 days. If she doesn't feel like someone is coming, she'll destroy the documents. She told me this morning. Ayana stood up from the bench. How long does she have? She asked. She gave herself until Friday, Elaine said. After that she says she's done. Today was Wednesday. She went to find Hyun-soo. He was in the hallway outside the dining room, finishing a call. He looked at her face when she approached and ended the conversation without explanation. She told him about the voicemail. Efficiently. No editorializing. He listened without interrupting, which she had already come to recognize as one of his primary forms of respect. When she finished, he said, "The analyst's name." Elaine didn't say it on the phone. Careful woman. He looked at the wall. If the documents she has go back 11 years and carry a second signature, this is no longer a donor misconduct case. This is organized financial fraud across multiple healthcare systems. He paused. The federal implications are significant. I know. Going back exposes you. I know that too. He looked at her. And you're going anyway. She met his eyes. That analyst sat on those documents for 11 years, probably because she was afraid of exactly what's happening to her right now. She came forward because of what I did in that boardroom. She paused. I can't let her watch me not show up. The silence was long. I'll need to arrange the return carefully, he said. Security. A controlled entry. We cannot announce your arrival. I wasn't planning to announce anything. Ayana. He said her name for what she realized was the first time without a title in front of it. She noticed. She filed it away. Going back means they will use every available mechanism to discredit you before you can present the documents. Your license review is accelerating. They may move for an injunction. They can try, she said. You need to understand what you're walking back into. I do understand. She looked at him steadily. Do you understand why I can't stay here? Something in his expression shifted. Not softened exactly. Moved. Like a wall that doesn't come down but acknowledges the thing pressing against it. Yes, he said. I understand. That night, she couldn't sleep again. She lay in the guest room and stared at the ceiling and made herself confront the thing she had been careful not to look at directly. She was scared. Not of Whitaker. Not of the license review. She had been in rooms that tried to erase her before, and she was still standing. No, what scared her was the possibility that she had already lost. That the machine was too large and too entrenched, and that everything she had done had only succeeded in making it angry. She got up at 2 a.m. and went to the kitchen for water. Elder Kong was already there. The old woman was seated at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, a lamp on low, a posture that suggested she had been awake for some time. She looked at Ayana without surprise. Ayana filled a glass of water and stayed at the counter. You are afraid, Elder Kong said. Yes. The old woman nodded slowly. Not with comfort. With recognition. Fear means you understand the weight of what you are carrying, she said. The ones who feel no fear carry nothing worth protecting. Ayana looked at her. Did you ever feel it? When decisions were this size. Elder Kong turned her cup slowly in her hands. Every day for 40 years, she said. I ran this family's affairs when my husband became ill. I made decisions that men twice my size tried to reverse. She looked up. They could not reverse them. How? Ayana asked. Because I did not give them time, she said. I moved before they finished planning their opposition. She set down her cup. Go back. Move fast. Do not give them a clean target. It was the most Elder Kong had offered her. It cost something, that offering. Ayana could see it in the precise way the old woman composed herself after speaking, as though generosity required a moment of recovery. Thank you, Ayana said. Elder Kong rose. At the doorway she paused. My son, she said without turning around. He has not spoken of his work to anyone outside this family. Not once. In 17 years. A pause. He spoke to you. She left. Ayana stood in the kitchen with the water glass in her hand and felt the weight of that sentence settle into her slowly, the way things do when they are true and you know it and aren't ready yet. Her phone lit up on the counter. A news notification. The headline read, Atlanta General announces independent review of doctor at center of funding controversy. Board cites patient safety concerns. They had flipped the language. She was no longer the one raising patient safety concerns. She was the patient safety concern. The hospital wing flooded at 6 a.m. Atlanta time. Not water. It was worse than water. Ayana was on a video call with Elaine when the news broke, a controlled leak to 3 local outlets simultaneously, which meant it was coordinated. The East Wing of Atlanta General, the trauma wing she had spent 6 weeks documenting, had been found to have falsified equipment inspection records. The inspection certificates that had been filed going back 18 months were forgeries. But the story wasn't about Whitaker's negligence. The story was about the forgeries themselves, and the name attached to the internal complaints that had originally flagged the equipment issues was Ayana's. They had taken her documentation, her legitimate, accurate, carefully compiled documentation, and they had reframed it as the origin of the forgery trail. She was being positioned as the person who had discovered the problem because she had created it. She stared at her laptop screen and felt something she rarely allowed herself, a specific, targeted fury. Not hot, cold, the kind that sharpens everything. Ayana, Elaine said from the video call. The analyst, she saw it. She called me 20 minutes ago. She's ready to destroy everything. Don't let her, Ayana said. I'm trying. Ayana, she's terrified. She has a daughter. They threatened her daughter's school enrollment. Someone called her daughter's school. Ayana closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then opened them. Tell her 48 hours, she said. I'm coming back. She ended the call and went directly to Hyun-Soo's study. She didn't knock. He was already on his feet. He had seen the same news. They've accelerated, he said. Yes. This means they're feeling pressure from somewhere. He looked at his phone. Coordinated leaks at this speed suggest they believe the federal inquiry is closer than we thought. They're trying to contaminate the evidence pool before it can be formally submitted. They used my documents, she said. I know. Hyun-Soo. She said his name with the particular weight of someone who needs to be heard completely. They took the thing I built to protect people and turned it into the proof that I'm the problem. That is not a legal maneuver. That is personal. He looked at her. Steadily. Without performing sympathy or trying to redirect her into strategy. Yes, he said. It is. I need to go back today. I know. I need to go back today, and I need to walk into whatever they have prepared, and I need to stand in it without flinching because the moment I flinch they have won and I cannot let them win. She stopped. Breathed. Can you get me there safely? Yes, he said. No qualification. No condition. Just yes. She turned to leave. Ayana. She stopped. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. Close enough that she was aware of the physical proximity in a way she hadn't permitted herself to be before. He looked at her with a particular expression she had been watching develop over days, the one that had started as professional assessment and become something he had no clean name for and was not hiding as well as he believed. "You are not currency," he said. "You are not a piece being moved. Whatever happens in that building, that does not change." She held his gaze. "I know what I am," she said. "I know you do." He paused. "I needed you to know that I know it too." She left the room before either of them could say anything that required more time than they had. She found Elder Kong in the hallway outside. The old woman had clearly been nearby. Not eavesdropping, she was too proud for that, but nearby enough. She looked at Ayana with an expression that had finally shed its neutrality entirely. "My grandson," she said, "needs to see that the world contains people who do not yield to machinery." She paused. "Go finish what you started. Come back." It was as close to a blessing as Elder Kong would ever give. The flight back to Atlanta took 14 hours. She slept for 3 of them. She spent the remaining hours building the sequence, the order in which evidence needed to be presented, the specific people who needed to receive specific documents before she set foot in that building, the legal contacts Hyun-soo had arranged who would file the federal supplemental complaint the moment she landed. She was not walking in empty-handed. She was not walking in alone. The car from the airport moved through Atlanta in the gray early morning, and she watched the city like someone returning to a place that had tried to erase them and hadn't managed it. She felt the weight of what was coming. She didn't set it down. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The same number that had sent the photograph of Min-ho. "Welcome back. We've been waiting." She read it once. Then she typed back, for the first time, "I know." She put the phone in her pocket. The hospital came into view ahead. She found the files in a server room that wasn't on any floor plan. That was how she knew Hyun-soo had been here before her. The floor plan omission was not an accident. It was an edit, the kind made by people who needed something to not officially exist. And the door to that room, locked with a keypad, opened on the second try when she entered the code Hyun-soo had texted her 40 minutes ago, which meant he had either obtained it legally or in a way that would not bear examination. She had decided, somewhere over the Pacific, to stop asking which category his methods fell into and to focus instead on what the methods produced. What they produced tonight was 11 years of financial records, stored on a server that was never supposed to be found. She moved through it quickly. She was not a forensic accountant, but she had spent 6 weeks learning to read these documents like a language, and she was fluent enough now to understand what she was looking at within minutes. The second signature on the oldest documents belonged to a man named Gerald Fouché. His photograph was in the lobby downstairs, underneath the words "Founding Benefactor, Atlanta General Hospital." He was 71 years old, largely retired, and sat on the boards of 4 nonprofits and 1 university endowment. He was also, according to what she was reading, the architect of the original fund diversion structure that Whitaker had inherited and expanded. Whitaker hadn't built this machine. He had been handed it. She photographed every page. Methodically. No tremor in her hands. Outside the server room, the building was mostly quiet. It was 4 a.m. She had come in through a side entrance with a temporary contractor badge that Hyun-soo's legal team had filed legitimately as part of the Federal Inquiry Access Protocol. Paperwork was its own kind of weapon when you used it correctly. She was on her 3rd document folder when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. She went still. The footsteps slowed. Stopped. The door handle turned. She pressed back against the server rack. The room was dark except for the equipment lights. The door opened and Whitaker walked in. He looked older than he had in the boardroom 3 weeks ago. The age wasn't physical. It was the look of a man who had been running fast for a long time and could feel the ground changing under him. He saw her. For a long moment neither of them spoke. "You came back," he said. "I said I would," she said. She hadn't said it to him. But she had said it. "Those files won't hold up," he said. "Chain of custody has been documented from the moment I entered this building," she said. "Time-stamped. Witnessed remotely. Filed with the Federal Inquiry Office 40 minutes ago." He looked at her with the particular expression of a man recalculating very fast. "Fouché," he said. "Yes. You think going after Fouché helps you?" He stepped further into the room. Gerald Fouché has endowed a library, 3 professorships, and a children's arts program. He has been photographed with 2 governors. You file against him, and the story becomes about you destroying a legacy. The story becomes about the patients, she said. The ones who died in this wing because the equipment money went to Gerald Fouché's shell companies. You can't prove intent. I don't need to prove intent tonight, she said. I need to get these files to people who can. And I've already done that. He stared at her. You have nothing to gain from this, he said. Your license is under review. Your name is already Mr. Whitaker. She said his name quietly. I grew up 4 blocks from a hospital that let my uncle wait 6 hours with chest pain because nobody thought he was worth moving fast for. He survived. A lot of people don't. She looked at him with the cold, steady fury that had been burning since 6 a.m. You had the power to protect people, and you redirected it for profit. You didn't just steal money. You stole outcomes. I am not going to let you make this about my name. The lights in the hallway shifted. Blue and red. Police lights through the high windows. Whitaker turned toward the sound. When he turned back, there were 2 federal agents in the doorway behind Ayanna. She had known they were coming. She had coordinated the timing herself, with Hyun-Soo's legal team, with the federal inquiry officer who had been building toward this moment for weeks. Whitaker looked at her one final time. This was planned, he said. From the moment I walked into that boardroom, she said. That wasn't entirely true. It had become a plan over time, built from evidence and survival, and the particular stubbornness of someone who refused to be made into a cautionary tale. But it was true enough. He was arrested without resistance. 3 board members were contacted within the hour. Gerald Fouché's name went to the inquiry office before sunrise. Ayanna stood in the server room after everyone else had moved into the hallway, in the blue glow of equipment lights, and felt the specific silence of a thing that had finally ended. Not triumph. She had expected triumph and gotten something quieter. Something that felt more like the moment after you've held your breath for a very long time and finally let it go. Her medical license review was still pending. The machine had other parts still running. But the center of it had just been arrested in a hospital he had hollowed out, by agents holding documents she had photographed, with evidence she had spent 6 weeks finding and 3 weeks protecting. Her phone buzzed. Hyun-Soo. One line. I watched the feed. You were precise. She typed back. We were precise. A pause. Then, yes. She put the phone away. In the hallway outside, an Atlanta General night nurse she recognized stopped and looked at her. Just looked. Then nodded, once, with the specific weight of someone who had been waiting a long time for a specific thing to happen. That nod cost Ayanna something. She hadn't expected it. She pressed her back against the wall for a moment until she was sure she was steady. Then she walked toward the exit and the gray Atlanta morning and the next part of the fight. 6 weeks after Whitaker's arrest, Ayanna stood in front of the Georgia Medical Board and answered every question they asked her. She had prepared for this the way she prepared for difficult surgeries, not by hoping for a particular outcome, but by anticipating every complication and having a response ready. She had legal representation, which she had largely drafted herself before handing it to the attorney. She had a documented timeline of every action she had taken. She had 7 character testimonials from colleagues. She had a letter from the federal inquiry officer confirming her cooperation and the legitimacy of her evidence collection. She had also brought the file. Not the full file. A specific subset. 3 cases. 3 patients. Their ages. Their diagnoses. The equipment failures that had affected their care. The dates on which the funding to correct those equipment failures had been redirected, and where it had gone. She placed the subset on the table in front of the board at the beginning of her statement and said, simply, I'd like you to read these before we begin. They read them. The tone of the room shifted somewhere during the 3rd page. The license review was suspended pending the outcome of the federal inquiry. Not resolved. Suspended. The machine was not done. But it had paused, and she would take the pause as the partial victory it was. She called her mother from the parking lot. Her mother cried. Ayanna held the phone away from her ear until she could hear steady breathing again. Then she said, "I'm okay, Mama." And then, because it was true and her mother deserved the truth, "I'm tired. But I'm okay." "Come home," her mother said. "Not yet," she said. "Soon." She went back to work. Not at Atlanta General. Not yet. The investigation was ongoing, and her formal reinstatement required the completion of several bureaucratic sequences that would take weeks. But she had been granted temporary consulting access to the patient advocacy office, which meant she could be in the building and could see patients even if she couldn't yet operate. She used it. Every day. The trauma wing had been placed under new interim administration. A woman named Dr. Sandra Osei, whom Ayanna had never met but who turned out to be precisely as unimpressed by institutional politics as the situation required. They had coffee on Ayanna's third day back. They talked for 2 hours. By the end of it, Osei had shared 3 concerns about the wing's current state and Ayanna had shared 12, and they had agreed on a list of 8 immediate reforms to propose to the board. The suspended nurse was reinstated on a Thursday. Ayanna found out by text and sat in her temporary office and looked at the wall for a while. Min-ho sent her a sketch. An envelope arrived from Seoul, no return address, but she knew the handwriting from the note Hyun-soo had sent with the wire transfer confirmation. Inside was a single piece of paper, pencil on white cartridge, the hospital wing drawn in the clean geometric lines of someone who was learning to make things instead of inherit them. At the bottom, in small careful letters, "For when you rebuild it. MH." She pinned it above her desk. Hyun-soo's foundation transferred funds to Atlanta General's trauma wing on a Friday, processed through proper channels with full documentation and no fanfare. The transfer note read, "For patient care infrastructure. Unrestricted." He called her that evening. "The transfer cleared," he said. "I saw." A pause. "How are you?" She considered the question honestly. "Tired," she said. "But present." "That's enough," he said. "Is it?" "For today," he said. "Tomorrow requires a different calculation." She looked at Min-ho's sketch on the wall. "He wants to study medicine," she said. A brief silence. "He told me," Hyun-soo said. 3 nights ago. Over dinner." A pause that held something she had learned to recognize as the specific weight of a man choosing his words carefully because they matter. "He said you showed him that it was possible to be inside a broken system and still refuse to break." She didn't answer for a moment. "I'm still working on that," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why he believes it." She stood at her office window. The wing below was lit and moving. Nurses on rounds, a family in the corridor, a resident writing notes at the station with a particular intensity of someone still learning that attention saves lives. She watched it for a long time after she and Hyun-soo ended the call. A new patient arrived at the wing entrance below. Small. Frightened. The same approximate age as the child in room 114. A nurse came out to meet her and took her hand without being asked. Ayanna watched the child walk inside. Then she looked back at her desk. At the files still open. At the federal inquiry timeline still posted on her wall. At the name she still needed to reach, the statement still to be compiled, the structures still standing that hadn't been touched yet. The work was not done. It had changed shape, but it was not done. She sat down and opened the next file. Under her door, 30 minutes later, a folded note appeared. She didn't hear footsteps. She found it when she stood to refill her water. She unfolded it. Whitaker was one name on a longer list. The system still has shadows. Watch carefully. No signature. She read it twice. Then she set it on her desk next to Min-ho's sketch and looked at both for a long moment. The promise of what could be built, and the reminder of what still needed to be torn down. She picked up her pen. The administrator disappeared on a Tuesday. His name was David Chun. Mid-level, facilities oversight. 22 years at Atlanta General. The kind of person who processed paperwork and attended quarterly meetings and whose absence from either would go unnoticed for a full week if it weren't for his assistant, who called the police on Wednesday when he missed a meeting he had never missed in 11 years. Ayanna found out on Thursday. She found out because his assistant called her. Not the police. Not HR. Her. Because David Chun had come to the patient advocacy office 6 days earlier and sat across from Ayana and told her he had information about the equipment inspection forgeries. Specifically, about who had commissioned them and how the documentation had been routed to avoid any single person's signature appearing twice. He had given her nothing in writing. He had asked for time. She had given him the time he asked for. Now he was gone and she was looking at the note under her door with new eyes. Whitaker was one name on a longer list. David Chun had been about to give her the next name. She went directly to the federal inquiry officer, a woman named Agent Reyes who had the particular economy of movement and expression that came from spending years in rooms where deception was the baseline. Ayana laid it out cleanly. The conversation with Chun, the timing of his disappearance, the note. Reyes listened without interrupting. "You should have documented the meeting immediately," she said. "I know," Ayana said. "I made a judgment call that he needed space to decide. It was the wrong call." Reyes looked at her. "At least you say so directly. I don't have time for anything else." Reyes leaned back. "We've been watching Chun for 3 weeks independently. He appears in the procurement chain at 2 of the other hospital systems. Not in a central role. A peripheral one. But consistent." She paused. "His disappearance suggests someone is cleaning house." "Fouché," Ayana said. "Possibly. Fouché's attorneys have been very active this week." Reyes looked at her file. "Someone is managing exposure. Removing variables." "Chun was going to talk," Ayana said. "Yes. Which means whoever took him knows he was going to talk." She looked at Reyes. "Which means they know about me." "Dr. Brooks." Reyes held her gaze. "They have always known about you." She drove back to the hospital in the gray Atlanta afternoon and sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before going in. She needed the 10 minutes. Not to be afraid. Fear was present, noted, managed, but to think. She called Hyun-soo. "Chun is gone," she said. A pause. "I know. I was informed an hour ago." He was quiet for a moment. "Director Park has resurfaced in Tokyo. He met with someone from Fouché's legal team last week." "Park is the thread," she said. "He knows the full operational structure. He was inside your investigation and inside theirs. He knows both sides." "Yes. Can you get to him?" "I'm working on it." "Hyun-soo." She looked at the concrete ceiling of the garage. "Don't work on it in a way that creates new problems." A brief silence. The particular quality of silence that told her he had heard both the request and the thing underneath it. "I understand," he said. She went back inside. She mentored through the afternoon. 3 junior doctors. All of them had watched the case unfold from the inside. All of them braver than they would have been 2 months ago. All of them also scared in ways they were still learning to name. She told them what she knew, which was not that courage was the absence of fear, but that the fear and the action existed simultaneously, and the action was a choice you made not once but every few minutes. One of them, a resident named Kwame, stayed after the others left. "Dr. Brooks," he said, "I filed a complaint last week about the night shift understaffing in the cardiac unit." "I know," she said. "I co-signed it." He looked briefly startled. Then something in his face settled. "Did anything happen?" "It's in review," she said. "That means it exists. Before, it would have disappeared." He nodded slowly. "Is this what it always is?" he asked. "This slow?" "Yes," she said. "And also occasionally very fast in ways you don't control." She looked at him. "Learn to work in both speeds." He left. She was reviewing patient charts when a file arrived on her desk. Delivered physically, a courier, signed for by the front desk, addressed to her by name. Inside was a single document, a deposition transcript. Name of the deponent redacted. Date recent. She read the first page. Then the second. The deponent had been inside Whitaker's operation from the beginning. Not peripheral like Chun. Central. They described the original agreement with Fouché. The structure of the fund diversion. The system for falsifying equipment records. The identity of the board member who had been the internal pressure point. the one who had withdrawn his signature from Hyun-soo's authorization agreement under pressure. And at the bottom of the third page, one sentence that changed the weight of everything she had built. The deponent stated that the original decision to monitor and ultimately discredit Ayanna Brooks had been made 14 months ago. Not in response to her boardroom confrontation. Not in response to her research. In response to a request from someone who had identified her as a potential threat before she had done anything. Someone had been watching her for over a year. Someone had seen her coming before she saw herself coming. She turned the page. The name of the person who had flagged her was on the next line. She read it. She sat very still. She reached for her phone and called Hyun-soo. He answered on the first ring. "Did you send me a deposition transcript?" she asked. "No," he said. "Immediately. Clearly." She looked at the document in her hand. "Then someone else is feeding me information," she said. "Someone who knows enough to know what I need and when I need it." She paused. "And the name in this transcript, Hyun-soo, the person who flagged me 14 months ago." "Tell me," he said. She told him. The silence that followed was the longest she had heard from him. "That's not possible," he said. "It's in the deposition." "That person was not involved in—" He stopped. "Hyun-soo, I need to verify this," he said. His voice had changed. The control was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. Something that sounded, very faintly, like the specific pain of a person who has just found a wound where they believed there was solid ground. "Who is it?" she asked carefully. "Who is this person to you?" A long pause. "Someone I trusted," he said. The name in the deposition was Park Sung-jin. Not Director Park. Park Sung-jin was older, more careful, and had no official title at Kang Hyun-soo's organization. He was listed in no public records. He appeared in no photographs. He had the particular invisibility of someone who had spent decades arranging to be unlocatable. He was also, as Ayanna discovered over 48 hours of careful work, the man who had introduced Hyun-soo's organization to Atlanta General 14 months ago. He had been the one to bring the acquisition review to Hyun-soo's attention. He had been the one to suggest Atlanta General as a target of interest. He had walked Hyun-soo's investigation directly toward Ayanna, and simultaneously, quietly, notified the people inside that investigation that she was someone to watch. He had been running both sides. She sat with this for a long time before she told Hyun-soo what she had confirmed. She told him in person. He had flown back to Atlanta 2 days after their phone call, which she had not asked him to do and which she did not comment on when he arrived. They met in the patient advocacy office, the door closed, the city visible through the window in the blue-gray of late afternoon. She laid it out, methodically. Everything she had verified independently, using her own sources, Reyes at the federal inquiry, Elaine's contact at the billing office, a document trail that took her 2 nights of consecutive work to assemble. He sat across from her and listened with the stillness she had come to know well. But this stillness was different. It had a different quality to its silence. Heavier. More interior. When she finished, he did not speak for a long time. "He was with my father," he said finally. "Before me. He advised the organization for 30 years. He looked at his hands. I trusted him the way you trust a structure you were born inside. You don't examine it. It's just part of the foundation." "I know," she said. "I brought him into this," he said. Not with self-recrimination. With the particular precision of a man who understood that understanding the mistake was the first step to not repeating it. "You brought him in," she said, "and then he tried to use you to protect himself. He needed your investigation to proceed far enough to flush out Whitaker, to eliminate the people who had documentation he hadn't controlled. You were doing his cleaning for him." She paused. He didn't count on the evidence going deeper than Whitaker. He didn't count on Fouché's name surfacing. "He didn't count on you," Hyun-soo said. She looked at him. "He flagged you as a risk," he continued, "and then watched you become exactly what he feared." Something in his expression shifted. Not a smile exactly, but close to one, and it cost him something to allow it under the current weight. "He was right to be afraid of you." She looked out the window. Below, the trauma wing was lit and full. A shift change was happening. She could see the incoming nurses arriving, the outgoing ones briefing them, the particular choreography of a place that kept running because the people inside it chose to keep running it. Reyes called that evening. Park Sung-jin had been located in Vancouver. He had left the country 4 days before Chun disappeared. The federal inquiry had expanded internationally. Interpol notification was filed. David Chun had been found alive, in a cabin outside Chattanooga, scared but physically unharmed. He had gone voluntarily, he told investigators. Someone had called him and told him he was about to be used as a scapegoat and that he should disappear for his own safety. The someone had told him to call a specific number when he was ready to come back. The number, when traced, led to an untraceable routing. Park Sung-jin protected him, Reyes said on the phone. I don't know if it was conscience or strategy. Does it matter? Ayanna asked. For the prosecution, no, Reyes said. For understanding what we're dealing with? Possibly. It was the kind of ambiguity that the case was full of now. People who had done wrong things and also, occasionally, right things. Systems that harmed and also, structurally, kept people alive. Men who could not be cleanly categorized as good or bad because they were neither. She thought about that as she drove home, her own apartment, for the first time in weeks, because the threat had receded enough for Reyes to confirm it was manageable. She parked, sat in the car. She thought about Hyun-soo, who had said almost nothing for the last hour of their meeting and then, at the door, had paused. Ayanna, he had said. Yes. When this is resolved, when the inquiry has what it needs, I would like to take a walk. A pause. A long one. Somewhere that isn't a hospital or an estate or a safe house. He looked at her with the specific directness of a man who has decided to say the thing instead of managing the thing. With you. She had looked at him for a moment. Ask me again when it's resolved, she said. I will, he said. Like a contract. She sat in her car outside her apartment and replayed that exchange and felt, underneath the exhaustion and the ongoing investigation and the license review still pending and the deposition still to be submitted, something that was genuinely, simply warm. She went inside. Her apartment smelled like the candle she had left burning on the shelf 3 weeks ago, long extinguished. It smelled like her life before all of this. She stood in the center of the living room and let herself feel the particular grief of the things that change when you fight. The colleagues who distance themselves, the version of normalcy that can't be returned to exactly, the you that existed before the night you chose not to leave the hospital. She didn't want that version back. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table. She opened the next file. There was still work. There would always be work. Late, nearly midnight, something slid under her door. She heard it. She stood slowly, walked to the door, looked at the white edge of paper on the floor. She picked it up. It was a single page. Typed. Centered. Fouché is not the end. There are 4 more systems. 3 more names. The documents you need are already in your possession. You received them 6 weeks ago and didn't know what you were looking at. She read it 3 times. 6 weeks ago. She had received a lot of documents 6 weeks ago. She had an entire archive she hadn't fully processed because the immediate case had demanded her attention. She looked at the page. No signature. No identifying marks. But at the very bottom, so small she almost missed it, a symbol. A specific brushstroke pattern she had seen once before, in the corner of a document on Hyun-soo's desk in Seoul, which she had noticed and not asked about because there had been too many other things to ask about. She looked at it for a long time. Then she went to the closet where she had stored the archive boxes. She pulled the first one down. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, the box open in front of her. She started at the beginning. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting here. Subscribe to Afro Korean Tales and Stories for a love that crosses cultures and lingers. Tell us in the comments, what emotion are you leaving this story with?